Welcome back to Hogback Observatory in Gallup, New Mexico. This is a series of videos to demonstrate how to assemble a PureTech Telestation observatory. To start this video, I'll have to establish that I've already got the walls of the observatory put together. It was too much going on to stop to do videos while that was happening, so I'm kind of taking a step back in the sense of coming after these are up to explain how to assemble them. On this one in particular, since it was 10.5 wide and 15 long, it came in 6 panels. Now, a smaller one might be just 4 panels, bigger ones might be more, but they're all going to kind of go together the same way. And when you uncrate the observatory, you want to take all these panels, and again, that's a panel there, this was another panel, this back wall was a panel, there's 2 here. It's a split right there, and there, and 6. So in this situation, there were 6 of the panels. And the paper instructions do a good job of telling you how to stage them after you have opened the crate so that you can put them together in the order they need to go. So that should be fine in the paper manual. And what they do, which is real good, is they put pieces of tape that show you what's going to go, what panel's going to meet up to the next one. And then the paper, like I said, instructions will tell you which order to put them up. Okay, so that I don't have to really cover that much, because you'll be able to find that easy enough. But what I will say, once you stage them and then get them ready to put them together, there's a little bit of prep work you're going to want to do. The instructions are going to tell you to put 2 walls together first that form a corner. And the reason for that is because you can put up those 2 walls and they'll stand together once you do them. But I will reiterate, these are heavy. They're very well built and very heavy. So I agree completely with the instructions when they tell you, doing the wall part, it's good to have at least 3 people. After that, you may get away with 2 people, but definitely have 3 people for putting the walls together. You need all the hands. They're a little bit heavy, especially if they're longer sections. You got a bigger telestation, and you're going to need them to be held while somebody bolts them together. So 3 sets of hands is a very good idea. 4, fine. More than that, I wouldn't go so many that you're just getting in each other's way, but I wouldn't go below 3 to put the walls up. So, according to the instructions for mine, and this will be similar to all of them, my 2 walls were the back wall and this first section of this side wall. It went from here up to there. And the first prep you have to do, you'll see all these braces here. Okay? Those braces will be attached to one of the walls, and the screws for the other side of the brace will be in the track and just in there kind of tightened, but they're usually close to the end. So what you need to do is, you're out the wall where you'll see the bracket is already attached, and the other wall it's going to attach to, where those screws are in the track, loosen them. Okay, don't take them out yet, just loosen them and slide them back out of the way. You do that for there, you'll be able to see where they're all at. And all those screws that are sitting here tight, not attached to the bracket, because the bracket will be on the other wall, but those you need to loosen and slide them out of the way. When you set these walls up. Mine is on a deck that I got on top of my deck, but yours might be on a, concrete foundation or whatever. When you put them up, you want to set your first corner, which they're going to tell you to do with the 2 panels. And one side of these, you see where this channel is. Okay, on the corners it's got a piece like this, but it's wider, and there's 2 channels in it, like this one. This channel, and then there's this other one. This wall, these brackets only go so far, and then these panels for the wall go a little beyond it. Just a little, and the reason is, when you line these up, those panels will slide in to that groove that goes all the way down, okay? So when you line this up, you'll have your one, somebody holding the one up, and on the other one, you'll hold it up, and you'll slide it in and match it up real carefully to where those panels will slide into the groove on this corner with the 2 grooves in it. It'll be the same on the other one you get there. Those corners are going to have 2 grooves. Okay, and if I go to the outside, you'll see that on the other side of this groove is a little piece like that. So it's wider with 2 grooves in it. Once you slide that together, find out it's, pretty tight, then you're going to take these brackets that were bolted on the other panel. Remember, you loosened these screws and moved them. They weren't in this bracket. They were on this wall, just sitting there, the screws themselves, and tightened up. So you loosen them and move them out of the way. The ones that were on the other wall, and you'll see that when you go to put these together. You'll slide those together, and then you need to bolt these screws in, okay? So to do that, the easiest way is at that point, then you have the button head screw, and then behind it in here, there's the nut that slides in and out of this rail, and it's threaded, and that button head bolt goes through the bracket and screws into that. Trying to get it focused good here, and screws into that nut that slides in this rail. So you'll then take those button head screws out. You'll slide the first drop in, is what it's called, a drop-in nut, all the way over till it lines up with that hole right there. And when it's lined up there, then you can use your Allen wrench and tighten that in there. Get it to catch and tighten a little bit. Then you'll slide the second drop-in nut behind there to line up with this hole, and you'll tighten that up. If it seems a little hard, then this bracket that was bolted to the other wall, you can loosen that up a little bit. See how that's screwed in to those 2 slots? You could loosen them a little bit so this will wiggle a little bit to help you to line those up. I wouldn't take this off all the way, just loosen them so these other braces are a little bit loose to give you some leeway to mess around with them while you're sliding that other nut in there, getting it lined up, and then screwing in the button head bolt into it. So once you get these lined up, don't tighten them quite yet. I would start from the bottom, have somebody on the outside of that panel, somebody at the end of that one, and have them push them together. So you got a good tight, make sure these are in the rail, in the slot in the rail, and they push them real tight, and then the third person can tighten, starting from the bottom. You can tighten all the screws in the bracket, and then the one here, and just work your way to the top. Making sure people are on the outside pushing that together, keeping it tight. Once you get all 3 of those screws, or those brackets, there's actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 of them in the corner here. Once you get them together, then this wall will stand on its own. And then we'll go over in the next video you want to square these up to proceed on so that your observatory stays square during the assembly process. But that same procedure for putting these walls together is going to be the same everywhere. Same for this corner. When you get to do that, when you put these together, the side panels, if you have a longer one that has several panels that create the side, I'll show you that in the next video too, how those go together. Pretty simple. Only difference is it's not a corner. Okay. And then as you go along the process, you'll set your square in this first corner. That's the one that you're going to use as your reference for squaring up the entire observatory. Okay. And we'll start that in the next video, explain how to do that and use these brackets and everything to keep it square as you move across the building assembling it. Okay, let's talk now about squaring up your observatory and keeping it square as you build. So when you get ready to build your observatory, you may have it on a concrete pad, you may have it on a wooden deck, you may have it on dirt. I don't know why anybody would do that. It'd be hard to keep your telescopes and instruments clean with the dirt floor. But the point I'm trying to make is you're going to set this on something, and whatever you set it on may or may not be square. So for instance, if you had a concrete pad poured by a company to build the observatory on top of, you are trusting that they did the proper job of forming that up nice and square. They may or may not have. Also, you may be setting it on a larger pad, and it may be somewhere within that large patio or whatever, not necessarily being built on a square corner of that. All this goes to say, never trust that your deck that you're going to put it on or concrete pad or whatever is square, even if it was built to size. Unless, of course, you made sure that the concrete pad or the deck was built square. Now, I built this myself. I got the dimensions of what the observatory was going to be from Vito at PeerTech, so I could build the deck to match it. So I know it's square because I built it square and I checked it. However, there's an old saying in carpentry, measure twice, cut once. What that means is if you measure it the first time and your measurement's off and you cut your piece, the piece is going to be wrong. So then you're going to have to go recut that piece, measure again, make sure you get it right, measure it twice that time so you make sure your cut is right. I'm going to extend that to this to say check twice, build once. So if you build this assuming that you're starting at a square corner and it ends up not being that, you just use the lines, the side lines of your concrete pad, your deck, whatever, and then you get to points in the build where things don't fit right because you assumed everything was square and it wasn't, then you have to take some stuff apart to re-square your building. Check twice, build once. I know this is square because I built it square. And the purpose of this video isn't to go into how that was done. We're going to not get on a tangent and stay with keeping this observatory square. So even though we started this observatory in the corner, when we assembled these walls, we still checked it for square. The best thing to use for that is this right here, called the carpenter square. And there's my jackal rat dog, Cassie. She's always saying, Inspector, make sure I'm doing everything right. Isn't that right, Cassie? Good girl. Good little pound puppy. Okay. So, when you put this together, and on the inside, remember there's the little brackets that go up along it. There's 6 different brackets that went along it on the inside. And you slide the walls together, making sure, of course, let me get that right, making sure that everything's fit into the slots. Hold it up tight, and then inside you screwed those brackets together. But once you do that, those little brackets, hopefully at the factory, were made square. Most times they are, sometimes they're off a little bit. So the corner will be close to square with those, maybe perfectly square if they were milled perfectly square. But as you see, these are long walls. So the farther you get away from this corner, the more these walls can be pushed and moved in or out, which will throw the building as a whole out of square. So inside, you put this together, you screw those brackets tight. You still want to come out here and check that it's square. And the way you do this with a square like this is you set it up against that bottom rail. If this can rock back and forth when it's pushed up there tight, it means that these walls aren't perfectly square. They're in a little bit. So that, if you can see this right here, where your square is butting up against the corner, is tight, but each wall is in a little bit so that square can rock back and forth. It won't be massive. I mean, that would be so out of square you'd probably notice it with your eye, but you'll get a little bit of rock in there. If it's the opposite way and those things are split too wide, so this is too far that way and that's too far that way, then your square won't fit all the way tight against this corner. It'll touch there, it'll touch over here, but you'll have a little gap right there. Like, you know, this is exaggerated, but I'm proving the point. They'll touch on either end, but you'll have a gap there. That means your walls are too wide and out of square. So after you bolt the 2 first walls together, you put a square, good long square. The longer, the more accurate. Put a good long square on there and check it. Make sure it doesn't rock and there's not a big gap there. That's going to show you that it's square. So now we're going to go back to the inside. And remember, at that point, all you have together is 2 sections to form a corner. And you have then tightened up and bolted those brackets together. So now from the outside, you can tell that you're sitting square on the corner. These 2 walls are square. They create a 90-degree angle right there. So now you want to go out and start to affix this to your base. That way you can maintain your square. You know your square here, so you go to your first 2 brackets that are going to be used to bolt this to the deck. Now mine is a wood deck, so I was able to do this with, oh, there's little Cassie again. I was able to do this bolted into the deck with some structural screws. If you are doing it into a concrete foundation, then you're going to want to use concrete anchors. And the process for that, I won't go over too much on this, but basically when you have your bracket down there, you'll mark that spot, you'll move that bracket up, you'll take a hammer drill, drill a hole into the concrete, set your anchor down in there, bring that bracket down on top of it, set your nut on top and tighten it. It'll expand the wedge piece that's down in the concrete to catch on the concrete, and will hold it tight. The instructions for, you know, what anchor you're going to use, what drill bit size you need, and all that are usually on the package of the concrete anchor, and it will lay out just how to do that. Okay, so we're here now, and I want to set these to maintain my square corner. So on these brackets, these screws that are here were just like the screws that were in the side wall. The bolts were here but tightened, and the bracket was fixed to the other wall. So it just had the bracket on the wall here, a couple of screws on the other side that, you know, as I explained earlier in the video, you took the bolts out, slid it behind there, lined it up, and screwed them in. Same thing here, but these screws were farther up on the wall, but they were up here with the bolt, I should say, not screw. I know I keep interchanging those. They're two different things, but on all of this, they're bolts. So the bolts and the nuts were up here and tight, not with the bracket. The bracket was separate. So these, you just loosen them, let them fall down to the ground, bring your bracket over, and then you want to take your very first screw there, take the bolt out, and the nut that's behind it, remember the sliding nut? You want to slide that up to a certain point that's comfortable for you, you know, depending on how tall you are or whatever, probably on your knees at this point, but get it where it's in a comfortable position where you can see it real easy. Okay, you're going to take this bracket, you're going to put the bolt through the bracket itself. You're going to bring this up to where you have that nut. And that nut's going to be there for one of two reasons. Let me bring you over here. Number one is you used your magnet, and let me go back, this long screwdriver, and you can get underneath that sliding nut, slide it up to a comfortable height, okay, and then once it's there, of course I've only got one hand to use right now, so pretend this is being held here by one hand. Then you take your magnet, and that will hold that nut in place. Okay, you can do it that way, or because you'll have two hands and not be holding a phone, you can bring that nut up to here, hold it in place, and then with the other hand you will have put that bolt, that first bolt, in the first hole of that bracket, lifted it up here, lined it up with that nut, and then started the screw in there. So you'll start it in there, you'll tighten it till it's going to hold enough where the whole thing won't fall down the rail. You'll tighten it up a little bit so you can do that. You'll bring the second nut, which is going to be, you know, behind here that this one is attached to right now. That's attached to, but in the wall it'll just be the bolt into that screw. You'll take that bolt out of that one, get underneath that second nut, bring it up to where you have that bracket with one bolt in it, but sideways, and there's a reason for the sideways. Okay, you'll hold it up here, and then you'll twist that bracket down. Remember, the top screw's already in it up here. You'll bring it down, you'll line up the second bolt with the bottom nut and the hole that's here. You'll get that started, get it where it's snug but not tight, and then you can take the whole thing. This will then be up here but a little bit snug, and then you can run it down the wall till it's flush with your deck. Okay, that's the easiest way. If you try to do it while it's down here, you're not going to get to this bottom nut to line it up. So that's why before you apply this bracket, you are going to move these two screws and nuts up to an eye level. Okay, well, let me back off a little bit. You're going to let them fall to here, and then you're going to loosen the first one, take the bolt out. You're going to slide the nut up to eye level for yourself to make this all easy. Okay, holding it with your screwdriver. Put the top bolt through the bracket, hold it with your other hand, bring it up to where you have this held, line it up, screw it in and tighten it. Not super tight, just enough to where it doesn't fall down. Okay? Then, because that's up and out of the way, you'll have access to this bottom nut. So then you'll slide that nut up and go through the thing, swing down your bracket, line it up, screw it in there, using this to hold it. Because if you try to assemble that down here, you will not be able to get to this bottom nut that's going to be behind here. You can bring it up a little bit and get to that nut, but you're going to be like bending over trying to see it. That's why you're going to slide the whole thing up here and get that prepped up here where it's easier for yourself. You can see around it. You're not hurting your back bending over. You're not laying on the floor trying to see this thing. And then once you have these in there like this, but up higher, you can push the whole thing down and slide it to the floor. And then you'll be able to anchor this. And then after you anchor this to the ground, you will tighten those bolts. Okay? So, again, you already know this wall is square, and this is your first two spots where you can anchor this into your foundation. So you'll do that. You'll do the same procedure on this one as I mentioned for that. Moving your bolt and nut up here at eye height, getting it all set up, pushing it down. So you know you're square here and you're ready to fasten these in. So whether it's a structural screw or a concrete anchor, whatever you are going to use, depending on what your deck is, you'll fasten that down there. You'll tighten those two bolts right there, and you're not only are you square now, these brackets are going to hold that square. Then as you come across here, you know you're square. Do the same procedure. This is the back wall. Do the same thing here. The reason I say do it first on this back wall is, at least on mine, because it was 10.5 wide, this is one solid panel. Okay? The sidewall here was 2 panels. Depending on the size of your observatory, it might even extend more. So we'll get to this where these panels join and how you make sure you're still square there. But this is a solid panel here. So once that is square in the corner and you've set those two to hold that square, this one to extend out, this is not going to be off square unless you've pushed it or there's something that has caused that to move, to flex at the end. And normally you're not going to have that happen on this, because these rails, I'm going to tell you right now, are very strong. They're rigid. Okay? This is just an example here. This is one of these corner braces, but I've still got it off here. These things are very well made, heavy for aluminum, and extremely strong. That doesn't mean over a very long length they can't be flexed. That would still be hard, but over shorter lengths, those things would have to be damaged or manufactured incorrectly to, you know, flex and be out of line. Unless, of course, you've set these two pieces and for some reason someone coming in has pushed that one way or the other, you will get a little bit of flex, but not enough. Left to itself, it will stay straight. So once you come along here, solid panel wall, you can go ahead and set that, you know, bracket to anchor it to your deal the same way, same procedure. Bring the nuts up, do it up here, slide it down, anchor it in. So now you've extended that 90-degree angle in that square, this entire back wall, and at least to here. Now, then your next procedure is going to be to put this wall in. Okay, this, what I've just spoken about, was done before any of these other walls. This was done with just the first 2 walls. As I mentioned before, that You set those together, and that's going to set your square, because you go out and square it up. Your brackets are there, hold these walls together. It's going to form a 90 degree. You're going to check your square out there. Come in here, set these to hold your square. Extend it against this back wall because it's a solid wall. Set that one. So now your 90 degree is set with two solid panels. Solid meaning that these aren't pieces that are put together. There's not a split like there is in the middle here where two walls have come together and you've bolted them together. This was a single panel that came in the crate, already assembled. This was a single panel, already assembled. There's no weak point because it's a solid rail, top and bottom, with no split in it. Set your 90, your first two panels. Next, it's actually going to tell you, at least on this size, to set this section of wall, which is what we did, okay? I would stick with the process or the order that they said to do it in your paper instructions. So they very likely are going to have you just, after you set these two and set your corner, they're going to have you finish one wall with the different panels. So the next panel was this one here. Okay, the second panel on this wall. As you can see, and it will say this inside of your paper manual, which wall needs to match which wall. And on the wall itself, they have placed blue tape labeling which wall, where they come together, and you can just follow that right there. It'll say Observatory 1, Wall A. Observatory 2, Wall A. Put them together, and you'll see right there where with tape, it's also showing you exactly where each one goes. This wall will come to this wall, and you'll know it's correct because it's spelled out right there. It's done very well in the manual. So you will prep this wall the same as the other one. This wall panel here already had this attached. So it was much like the other walls. There's certain stuff attached that certain isn't. So then you will have the brackets there again that will be hooked there, and in the wall you'll just have the screw that's tight. You'll loosen it a little bit, move these out of the way. Okay. Just like we did with the first two walls. Okay. You'll notice here it says there's a screw here, which there was. Okay, because this bracket was here, it was already tight on one side, but there was a screw here. This is before we brought these walls together. There was just a screw in here, so you had to loosen that and move it out of the way. Loosen that, move it out of the way, because these brackets were already there in place. So that when you brought this wall together here, it was the same thing. This hung over the wall. You slid this in, made sure that it lined up with the slot. Okay. These again, brackets were there with just a screw in this wall panel, so those had to be moved out of the way. You'll see it when you go to put these together. You'll see the screws just sitting there in the wall tightened, and you'll loosen it, move it out of the way, so the wall is prepped so you can slide them together. You'll slide them together just like you did the other wall. Then you'll slide the nut over, line it up with the hole here, put the button bolt in, have somebody on either side of the wall, that side and that side, that person just kind of holding it. I mean, it's being held with this stuff, but still have somebody there holding it, and somebody on that side pushing it, so these can line up, come together, and be tight. Then once you know they're tight, you push the nut behind there, line up the screw, the button screw with the hole and the nut behind it that's threaded, put it in there, tighten it up, work down the wall, do it all the way along the wall. Same thing here. You'll move the screw over, you know, the nut underneath on this one, but you'll move it over behind the bracket, line up the button screw, or I'm sorry, again, button bolt with the hole in the nut that you just push over, and tighten it. Same thing with this one here. So when you're done, all these connections will be made. There's only going to be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like 6 places, and this wall is going to be together. So you put that together, and you'll just have that set in there. You're not going to set any more of these yet. So this wall will be complete. And then the instruction manual will tell you, you come over here and you do this one next. Okay, you're going to start assembling the length of this wall. You'll do the corner first. You'll do that exactly the way you did this corner. And then instructions will tell you which order, but you'll do this just like the video before explained how to do that first corner. You'll do this second corner. And then you'll put the next wall section up against it. Same thing, loosen the nuts that are in the wall that you need to, you know, the button bolts with the nut behind it, they'll be like over here on the bare wall, and you slide them out of the way, and then once those are out of the way, you'll be able to take this panel, slide it into this panel, same way, line it up, have somebody push from that side, somebody just holding that tight over there, because that will be able to flex at this point because you have not set any of these yet. So when you're pushing these walls on this second side together, that can flex a little bit if somebody's pushing really hard over there. So just have somebody standing behind there holding it. You've attached this panel, then they'll have you attach the second panel. Now, this is where we need to square this all the way down the length. Because when you get to the end, this is a solid panel, this wall too, with the door. And that's going to have to match up over here, right here. This is going to have to go into the groove of the front panel wall on that side and this side. Obviously, if we don't set this square, if this isn't square, or you've bolted this down all the way on both sides and haven't kept it square, when you get to here, these are going to be bolted down and this is not going to match up. The walls might be too wide. They might be both inward. You might have one in, one out, and this is going to be out of square. So to make sure it's square by the time we get there, we're going to start taking measurements. And this is how you keep it square. You already know your corner's square. You've locked in your square earlier. You put the rest of your walls together over here, the rest over here. Take a tape measure. Always measure from the same spot during this whole process. In other words, if you're going to measure from the inside of the rail here to the inside of the rail here, that's what you do every time. You don't change it and then start measuring from here. Okay? Where you decide you're going to measure, whether it's from here or here to the other side, do it exactly the same every time. Second point is, measure it at a point where you can know you're straight across. In other words, don't just randomly somewhere in the middle here, hold your tape measure there and go over here and somewhere randomly in the middle, take your measurement. That can be off, because if on that side you started your measurement here and over here you're holding your tape measure over there, see the difference in that length? That will throw your measurement off. So measure right in front of that bracket to right in front of that bracket. It's a good place to make sure you're in the same spot on opposite walls. When you do your next measure, measure right here by where this rail comes down. To the edge of that rail, maybe inside to the edge of that rail. So you know when you do the other side, it will be exactly the same. This first rail, right down there. So you don't get your tape measure turned like this when you're doing your measurements. That will throw it off. Because one time you might be straight across, you make the next measure, but you're off a little bit. That'll throw it off. Always reference it from the same points on each wall. When you do your next one, do it right here from the inside to the one straight across. Same spot on that wall. Make sure that measurement is exactly the same. Just going to give you a random number. If this is 110 inches exactly, then your next measurement needs to be exactly 110 inches. Not 110 and a quarter, not 109 and a half. Exact. You set this corner exactly for a reason, to keep everything square. Once you have a straight line here, your 90-degree square corner, and you start measuring across, indexing from the same spot on opposite walls with the exact same measurement. And the first measurement is back here, because this is what's going to tell you what that measurement has to be. From this square corner, when you measure from here to here, whatever that measurement is, because these are bolted together, square is set, these are bolted tight, that distance is your reference measurement. And you stay with that from that point on. Every time you move back, get another reference point and measure, it's going to be whatever that was. Let's say it was 110, make this 110. Go to your next one, make that 110. Go to your next one, 110. Whatever that is, depends on the size of your observatory. If it's a 135, doesn't matter. If it's 118 and 3/8, that's first measurement is the measurement you follow with every measurement after that. Okay? That's going to keep your building square from side to side. And why that is important is right here where these panels come together, it's a flex point, meaning that before these were bolted down with those to hold them, this here, you could push that back and forth a bit. That is not a solid rail on the bottom or the top now. It's only solid for each individual section. And then here is a flex point where that can be moved. And if that gets moved, or the other one gets moved, it throws your building as a whole out of square. So the second check you're going to make once you put these walls together, since this is a flex point, is you're going to take your square here and you're going to lay that up against there. Okay? If you lay that up against there and this has been pushed in a bit, then again this will rock. It'll rock back and forth a little bit because this is not straight. If it's pushed out that way, then this is going to touch on either end, that end or that end, but you're going to have a gap right in there because that was pushed out a little bit. So you're going to check that, make sure this lays on there nice and tight, doesn't rock, doesn't have a gap. Then you'll know that this is straight all the way down your wall length, because where you put it together, you made sure that was straight. You'll do your measurements on both sides. They'll come out the same, and you will have a perfectly square building all the way down. These two sections are together. Those two are together. Then you have to put your end wall on. You'll lift it up. You'll bring it where these again are like the others. These panels are going to go beyond the rails a little bit because they need to slide in as one whole thing. As you push this up, all these will match that groove, and it'll slide in there. It'll slide in there. The wall prep was the same here as it was the back wall, moving, the bolts and the nuts out of the way so you could slide this together, and you'll bolt all that up. Okay? And then at that point, you'll have all your walls assembled. Okay, however many pieces that'll be. Mine was 6, yours might be more or less, but you'll have 2 end walls and 2 side walls, no matter how many sections it took to make those side walls. Your corner is square. You've extended it a little bit to hold it on those 3 points. You assembled the length of both walls, making sure that you laid your carpenter square along there to make sure that's good and straight. Then you take your base or your reference measurement here across that 110 or whatever it's going to be, whatever that is, that's what you stay with. Then you can come to your next one, make that exact same measurement. Might have to have somebody tweak the wall in and out a little bit. Shouldn't be bad here, but it can get wider as you go. So make sure those are exactly the same as that first reference measurement, and then set those 2 into your foundation. Come to the next one, measure across here, that point to that point. It's going to be the exact same measurement as that reference measurement was, and the next one. This will be the same. You can set that and set that. Come across here, exact same measurement, that 110 or whatever it was across there. And then set those down, and before you bolt them in, double check that again, make sure you're still good and straight. Do the same over here. At this point, you should be good and straight with your carpenter's, the length of your carpenter's square there. This measurement from there to there should be the exact same as that, exact same as that, exact same as your reference. Bolt those down. Do the same at the end here. And this, of course, since these are up and tight, will have the exact same measurement as that did, unless it was made wrong at PureTech, but it won't be. Vito does a very good job of making this stuff all good and tight, and his measurements are true. Okay? And then once you've done that, you can finish along the wall here. You'll have 2 more anchors, one there, that you will anchor into the floor. And your walls are up and everything is square. Okay? When you later get to building this roof, if this thing is out of square, or in the middle this was pushed in or out a little bit, wasn't straight along there, you can run into issues where this roof that's supposed to roll on and off gets bound up in the wheels out there. Okay? And that's because, let's say this is outside where all those wheels are on the side of the outside wall. They should be straight like this so that the roof can slide in and out. Well, if you set it where your walls are like this, that's exaggerated a little bit, but you get the point. Or is in a little bit, when those rails for the roof want to run through those wheels back and forth, they're going to bind. They're going to hit a point and it's going to get tight there, okay? You have a little play with them. They're not, the tolerance isn't so tight on those that, if you're off, 32nd of an inch, your whole roof system's going to fail. It's not that. But for smooth operation, to keep your motors from having to work hard to shove these 2 sides of your roof in and out, you want that to be as straight as possible. And that you did by keeping your square across the building and making sure at these joints where the panels have come together to form the length of the wall, that those are straight. Then that keeps all those rollers, and I'll go outside and show you. Okay, That keeps those straight so that these pieces here, let me get over where I can push this. These things are heavy. See how it's going out and in? I can just do that by hand because everything's good and straight. Okay? If your walls, if you haven't kept them true, those can bind up and you'll have issues with your roof over time. Okay? So there's how you do your walls, and you get them all together. You keep your corner square, assemble it as it says to do it, square it all the way across, and you're ready for the next step. And the next step, I know here I mentioned before I had to step back because I was so busy getting these walls up I didn't have time to do the videos, so I'm coming back to do them. And you'll see a video later about, the next video actually, about doing these motors. Okay, I already have them in place, but I did a video about them when I did them. That's the next video. This video, they're in place because I had to step back and go through the process of putting up the walls to record it on video. Okay, so that's it for this video here. The next one is the one that shows in detail how to do the motors, and then we're going to just keep going video by video to assembling this whole thing all the way to the roof, testing it and everything.